The words for our chalice lighting come from Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Peace in its most fundamental form is the connection of one human spirit to another. As we connect with each other, we engender understanding, trust, compassion, and every other expression of love. So here's a joke my maternal grandfather, my mother's father, told me when I was maybe 9, maybe 10. So one day, these 2 flies got trapped in a jar. And the jar had a lid, presumably with holes in it, but the jar had a lid. So no fly could come in, no fly could go out. And so the flies just began walking around the inside of the jar. They walked around for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and the day went on. Neither fly spoke. And again, no fly came in, no fly came out. The 2 just walked round and round and round. And then finally, the one fly said, "Hey, you." The other fly said, "Who? Me?" Okay, there is a reason I remember this joke nearly 50 years later. Remember, I was 9 or 10 years old. This joke blew my mind. This was not the kind of jokes that me and my friends told at the time. And yet I got it. I remember laughing and actually being surprised that I laughed, surprised that I got it. It was so subtle to the point of being subversive. And I think that's why I loved it. Now, here's the thing. So yesterday I was texting with my sister and I told her about the sermon, which is all about family. And I actually shared it with her because I'm telling some family stories. And in the text, I didn't write the joke. I just put flies in a jar, right? And she texted back and she said that she told the joke to her husband, Bill, and he didn't get it. And I'm like, "You actually remember this joke?" And she goes, "Yeah, I remember it." So I got it. My sister got it. But my sister told me that my dad actually told her this joke. And she remembers Dad laughing and Mom just rolling her eyes. So there's something in the genes that really, you get this joke or you don't. And I think, and that's actually what I thought about with this joke is, this joke actually changed how I think about humor. It kind of opened my mind to kind of a new kind of humor. And that has shaped me. That shaped what I think is funny, much to Karen's chagrin, mind you. And, and I was thinking, this is such a funny inheritance, isn't it? This is something I got from my family. So strange. Now, the reason I was thinking about this was, this is how I was shaped. And in this case, it was great. For me, anyway. This is very meaningful for me. But it made me think about, wow, I hadn't thought about this joke for years, and I realized how much it shaped me, and it got me thinking about the different ways that I might have been shaped by not just my immediate family, but my extended family, which is really interesting because I don't see my extended family very often. They live on the West Coast. I came to Virginia 30-some years ago, and here I am. And yet that connection is still there. Whenever I do see my extended family, I see the similarities, not just in physical appearance, although on the Monroe side, this is the Monroe body, right? There's no joke. It's really true. But it's not just in the body, it's in like the mannerisms, the way we talk or the way we laugh. It was a couple weeks ago, I was on a Zoom call, and someone said something. I kind of gave him a side eye, And I realized, oh my God, I look just like my Uncle Lynn, my dad's brother, And so that really, it's just kind of spooky at times. So that made me think of Thich Nhat Hanh. And so Thich Nhat Hanh said, if you look deeply into the palm of your hand, you will see your parents, your grandparents, and all generations of your ancestors. All of them are alive in this moment. Each is present in your body. You are the continuation of each of these people. Yeah. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. Not everything that we inherit is a positive, right? Sometimes we're the continuation of our parents and grandparents and ancestors in ways that we might not like. Let's say that we had a father or mother who was emotionally reserved when we were growing up, or who were stingy with their love or approval, or who had a tendency to lash out in unexpected ways. It's a safe bet that they learned that from one of their parents or caregivers. And guess what? That parent probably learned it from one of their parents. I touched on this in my last sermon. It's this idea of collective karma. Now, karma, is traditionally about cause and effect. It's a way of saying that sooner or later, our choices have consequences that we'll encounter. But collective karma looks at the bigger picture. It acknowledges the fact that we live with consequences of choices that were made not just by ourselves, but by others. By countless people that we don't know, countless people in our family tree. And those choices have just kind of had these ripple effects throughout the family into our lives. Now let me give you an example from my life. And it sounds fairly innocuous, and it generally is, but okay, so I was 12 years old. My father joined the Army. All right? So growing up, my family lived in Oregon, Northern Oregon, Portland, Salem, always within driving distance of our extended family. We didn't see them a lot, but we'd see them at Thanksgiving, etc. But suddenly, we pulled up roots. First, we moved across the country to Georgia, and then we moved across the ocean to Germany. And bear in mind that this was in the days before cell phones, Facebook, email. And so effectively, we were cut off from the extended family. Just cut off. And the thing is, I never looked back. I've seen my extended family once in a while. I've been back there, every 10 years. But they've never been a big part of my life. And for the last 30 years, I've lived a long way from my immediate family too, because my parents, they were on the East Coast for a while when my dad was stationed here, but they moved back to Oregon. All my family is on the West Coast, but I was here. Now, when I was younger, when Karen and I first got married, this was no big deal. It was actually kind of cool, right? Because, every year we'd fly across the country, get to see family, go on vacations, go see Crater Lake, etc. But over the last few years, I've actually felt the strain of this. I felt the strain when my father developed dementia, and I didn't get to see him very often. And then when my mom had open heart surgery, other side of the coast, I went, stayed with her for a week and helped, but pretty much I was absent. And so I really and when Karen's mother died, in December when she was sick and in the hospital and 6 hours away, and there was an ice storm and we couldn't get there immediately. I remember talking to my sister on the phone and saying, wow, this really looks like a bad idea, living across the country from people, living 6 hours away from people. Now, so it's like every year the physical distance is actually greater, the physical distance from the family. And I have to admit, this is my own choice, right? I came to Virginia for school. I chose to stay. So yeah, this is my choice. And I can see how this choice was shaped by my father's decision, my father's willingness to join the Army when I was 12 and to move us across the country. And guess what? My father's father also moved a lot. He moved the family around a lot as he went from job to job. And guess what? His father did the same. They were migrant farm workers in California. And they moved with the crops. And they just moved all around. So, yes, I'm an individual and I am here by choice, but my choice clearly has been influenced by the choices that were made before me. Can't say it's genetic, but there's this kind of willingness to pull up root, to move away. I inherited that. That's collective karma. So how do we live with our collective karma? That's really what I want to explore today. And one answer comes from the idea of family systems theory. Have you had a sermon on family systems theory? No? Geez, we've got to do that at some point. But family systems theory. So it's Bowen family systems theory. And what it talks about is the importance of differentiation. So yes, we exist in a network of relationships that shape us, right? With family, extended family, as well as other connections. There's no denying that. But it's a problem when we become enmeshed in those relationships. And that's the term, enmeshed. What enmeshed means is when we're in relationships and we lose all sense of boundaries. You know, we get caught up in trying to win the approval of others, to win their love, or to earn their love, or trying to manipulate them, or letting them manipulate us, or allowing them to manipulate us and even abuse us. It's when we allow each other to kind of play ourselves like a drum. Do you know what I mean? We feel this sometimes when we get together at family gatherings and suddenly you're caught up in all this drama. And it's like, why are you caught up in this drama? That's enmeshment, and that's a tough word to say. Differentiation breaks this pattern. When we're differentiated, we recognize that we are in a relationship with others, that we are connected to them. But we also have a sense of boundaries. Our well-being is not dependent on the approval of other people. Yes, we want to get along with people. We want to have peaceful relationships, but our well-being is not dependent on that. We don't have to get caught up in the drama of others. That's differentiation. We don't have to leave ourselves vulnerable to the manipulation or their destructive behavior. That's differentiation. We begin to make our own choices. And this is critical when we find ourselves in kind of difficult family relationships. When we're kind of always getting sucked into stuff, and we begin to really feel the damage that is done, right? And we end up with anger and resentment. That's the damage that is done. And so the question becomes, how do we break that? How do we kind of break that system? Often the first step in differentiation is forgiveness. To let go of our resentment or anger, no matter how justified that anger might be. That's the thing. Gabrielle Winchek is a family therapist, and she says that a big part of forgiveness is simply changing our relationship with pain. She said it means deciding to release some of the energy we spend on our pain. Now, this is a really subtle but important point, because in this situation, when we forgive someone, when we forgive a person, when we forgive our family or our ancestors, it's not saying that it was okay what happened. It's not saying that it doesn't matter anymore, because that's not necessarily the case. But in this case, it's simply saying, I'm going to let go of my anger about it. I'm not going to let other people live in my head rent-free. Right? That's such a powerful idea when we let people basically play us like a drum. When we let them in our heads and manipulate our emotions and run our days, run our holidays, whatever it may be. Forgiveness is how we let go of that. Wincheck quotes Desmond Tutu, we heard earlier. He said, forgiveness is when we take back control of our own fate and our own feelings. We become our own liberators. By this definition, Wincheck said, forgiveness is a gift that we give ourselves. So let me tell you more about my paternal grandfather. When he was a young man, he worked in logging. Both my families come from logging families. But at some point, he sustained an injury, head injury. And he had to quit logging, but it also affected his personality. This happened when my dad was young, and his brothers were very young. And their father basically became very distant and often angry, and they did not treat the children well. There was actually concern in the community. Well, when my grandfather died, it was a tricky situation because over the years, my grandfather had softened. He had become kinder. I actually knew him as kind of a kindly man who was actually very funny. I remember once, the first time I went to see him as a young adult, I went to visit them from college, and he took me out to get ice cream cones, which is something we'd done when I was young. And I'm sitting in the back with my ice cream cone, he's driving, and he rolls down his window so the wind is spraying ice cream on me. That was my grandfather. He was a lovely guy, as I knew him. But that wasn't how his kids knew him. So he dies. We're at the memorial service, and he was in a retirement community at the time. And the minister of the service only knew my grandfather in his final years. And so in his sermon, he talked about what a fine person he was and how he contributed to the community. He mowed lawns and did so many other things. And that was all true. But it wasn't the whole truth. There was pain present in the room, and they're hearing about what a wonderful person this was. So my father, during the time of open sharing, which thankfully came after the eulogy, he actually got up to talk. And he acknowledged the pain that was present in the room. He acknowledged the hurt, how my grandfather was not always a loving father. And he pointed out how their father wanted, whatever his faults, their father wanted them, his kids, to have a better life than he did. And they did. For all my grandfather's faults, he got his kids on good paths. All three of his kids went to college, first kids in the family to do that. They all were able to buy their own homes. They all raised families. And my dad said, that is something to be grateful for. In saying this, my father acknowledged that there was more to my grandfather than the damage he had done. And I think speaking that truth was a form of forgiveness. Now, I'll say one more thing. I realize it's getting late, sorry. But when I went to see my father the last year before he died, the last time I saw him, He actually spent just endless amount of time each day talking about his father. Some about his mother, mostly about his father, concocting these wild tales. About how my father built these buildings in Springfield and how he did this. And it's like we have no idea what was going on, but he was trying to work through some issues, even in that state. That's the inheritance. Now, the actress Kerry Washington recently published a memoir in which she talks about her family's history, which was rather complicated. In an interview with Krista Tippett, she talked about the importance of acknowledging our messy inheritance and how that messy inheritance shapes who we are. Here's what she said: if we have the willingness to ask ourselves, how did I become who I am? And how did they become who they are? I think it allows us to accept more of our messiness and to let ourselves be more human. She said, I think that's where we need to be operating from, the messy humanity of each other, and less from deciding who our enemies are and deciding who's good and who's bad. This forgiveness, this is just an expansive form of forgiveness. The idea is that we forgive people, both known and unknown, who made such a mess of things. Those people in our family tree who's had these ripple effects, who've just dumped a load on us. We forgive them for that. And we forgive ourselves for inheriting that mess. That's forgiveness. Now, this doesn't change who we are or the mess we inherited, but it opens us to healing. And let's say that Thich Nhat Hanh is right, that we are a continuation of our parents and grandparents and all our ancestors. If that's the case, then maybe if we open ourselves to healing in this way, if we forgive our family tree, then maybe that healing that comes with forgiveness extends up to the family tree. Maybe we really can heal our collective karma. May it be so. Amen.